Howdy, y'all. Today we're doing law of cosines, and the law of cosines is going to help us a lot because the world isn't full of right triangles, as we can all see, and sometimes we have to deal with triangles that don't have right angles, and they kind of look like this. So I don't see any right angles unless I was to drop, a line down from this top point and form a right angle, but we're not going to do that. So we can use law of cosines to solve this triangle, and it's also called an oblique triangle. Oblique triangle. Whenever I'm going to write triangle, I'm just going to draw a little miniature triangle. Because as a mathematician, we've designated that as triangle, and we can be lazy now. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and get started with some little nifty tricks to remember the law of cosines. Well, the law of cosines is a squared is equal to b squared plus c squared. Well, hey, look, isn't that just the Pythagorean theorem? And guys, what I should have done beforehand is drawn this nifty little triangle, and we're going to label our triangle like we've done in the past, where our angles are capital letters and our sides are lowercase, and the sides are always opposite of the angles. So this little guy will be A, little b, and then little c over here. Not much difference between big C's and little c's. You had to make sure you got that covered. Okay, so we have the fact that a squared is equal to b squared plus c squared, which looks like the Pythagorean theorem, minus 2bc cosine of angle A. That means if I was given three pieces of information, so side angle side, for instance, I could solve for another side or the other angles. I could solve this triangle, and to solve a triangle means to find all the sides and all the angles. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and get started with an example. So my first example is just going to be a simple case in which I have one side. Let's draw my triangle. I have an angle, call it angle A, is equal to 70 degrees. Side C is 8, and side B is 8. We'll call that B. And side C is 6. So angle A was 70, side B was 8, and side C was 6. And I'm going to find the side length of A. So I want to know what little a is. And I've lost my... Oh, there he is. I want to find out what little a is. To find little a, I'm going to use that first formula. So a squared is equal to b squared plus c squared minus 2bc cosine of capital A, or cosine of angle A. So why don't we fill in what we know? I'm looking for a squared is equal to b squared, or 8 squared plus 6 squared minus 2 times 8 times 6. So 2 times b times c times the cosine of angle A, which was 70 degrees. Now guys, I can't move the cosine 70 degrees over until I've finished with 2 times 8 times 6. Why don't we do some simplifications? I'm losing my mouse all over the place, so sorry for all those little sonar pings. We get a squared is equal to 64 plus 36 minus 96 cosine 70 degrees. And guys, if you need to take a minute to pause the video to confirm the fact that you can type that into your calculator, you're more than welcome to. And a further simplification is a squared is equal to 100 minus 96 cosine theta. And now I'm just going to take the square root of both sides, and I'm not going to have, last time when we took the square root of something, we had to introduce a plus minus. This time I'm not going to, because I can't have a negative side length. So it doesn't make sense for us to have a negative side length, so I don't need to introduce a positive minus or a plus minus symbol. So A is just going to be 100 minus 96 cosine of 70 degrees. And when I type this into my calculator, I get approximately 8.2. So the side length of A is just 8.2. So I'm going to erase A, and we're going to go ahead and write it. We'll write it in red as 8.2, or about 8.2. That's what the little wavely things is. And someone has dropped something in my Dropbox. Thank you very much. I'll look at it later. Okay, now I'm going to do one more example using the same triangle and our new piece of information. I want to find out, well, what is the degree, or what is the angle of measure B? And I can write this as M, measure of angle B. And this is a question. Those three symbols constitute a question because, once again, mathematicians are lazy. Now, as a mathematician, we have another law of cosine law equation that we can use. And this time, we're going to use the second one, where b squared is equal to a squared plus c squared minus 2ac cosine b. So why don't we go ahead and write that one down? We have b squared is equal to a squared plus c squared minus 2ac cosine of angle B. Now, remember guys, if we're solving for b squared over here, we'll be taking the cosine of the angle B. And then if you have a squared plus c squared, it's minus 2ac. And that's just kind of a pattern that we're going to see. So why don't we go ahead and start filling in our information that we know. We know that the side length of b squared is 36 because b is equal to 6. A is 8.2 squared, and we can type that into our calculator here in a minute. We know c is equal to 8, so c squared is 64 minus 2 times 8.2 times 64 times the cosine of b. Now this is, I'm going to reiterate again, I can't just, subtract over a cosine squared because it's multiplied by 2, 8.2, and 64. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit more so I get some more room. And when I've done simplifying this problem, I'm going to, well, first off, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. This is Algebra 1 stuff. We're going to subtract over 8.2, 64, and then we'll divide by a negative 2 times 8.2 times 64. So it'll look something like this. We'll have the cosine of b is equal to 36 minus 8.2 squared minus 64, all divided by a negative 2 times an 8.2 times a 64. And once we type that into our calculator, we get that side is equal to 39.2 divided by 98.4. Now I need to know the cosine of B, or I need to know what B is such that the cosine of angle B is 39.2 over 98.4. And guys, I don't have that triangle memorized if it was a right. So I'm going to use my calculator. I'm going to ask my calculator, what is the cosine to the negative 1, or the arc cosine of 39.2 over 98.4. That's less than 1, so my calculator won't give me a domain error, and it's going to end up telling me that it's equal to, or approximately equal to, 67 degrees. And I just rounded to the nearest degree. You guys can round to the nearest degree just to make our lives a little bit simpler. I'm not going to ask for 3 decimal places like we normally do. I wouldn't count it wrong if you gave me 3 decimal places. So this is 67 degrees. Now, another fact that we've learned a long time ago, probably somewhere in geometry, or actually I think you learned it in the 8th grade, is that when you add up all the angles inside of a triangle, they equal to 180. So I don't need to use law of cosines to figure out what that last thing is. I know the fact that 180 is equal to 70 plus 67 plus the measure, there's a plus sign there, of angle C. So 180 minus 70 minus 67 is going to be the measure of angle C. When you guys walk into class tomorrow, which would be Friday, I want you to tell me what C is. So have a great evening, and I'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye.